Welcome to this CyberUK 2021 session, How to Make a Difference Locally. I'm Chris Ensell, Deputy Director for Cyber Growth at the National Cybersecurity Centre. In my role, I use NCSE's expertise brand to build new cybersecurity capability in education, research, innovation and industry. I'm delighted to be able to introduce this session. As part of my job, I've been involved in many initiatives to build national capabilities such as Cyber First and Cyber Essentials, creating, if you like, a national ecosystem of organisations developing the skills, products and services the UK needs to be a safe place to live and work online. That's great at the national level, but to be successful, such an ecosystem needs a strong local presence with organisations that understand the unique specialities and challenges within their regions and are able to bring together groups from across government, industry, academia and the local community to form partnerships, provide opportunities for collaboration and sharing best practice. Across the UK, we have numerous cyber clusters that are doing just that, and they are here to tell us more about how they are making a difference locally. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Richard Yorke of Cyber Cheltenham rather, or CyNam as it's better known, to chair what will be a fascinating discussion. Richard, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chris, and hello everybody. I'm delighted to be joined on the panel today from three other leaders from clusters across the UK, and so in no particular order to introduce them. We have Phil Jackman from CyberNorth, that's the cyber cluster in the northeast of England. Clare Johnson, who runs the Women in Cyber cluster, part of the wider Cyber Wales initiative, and she's also Partnerships and Outreach Manager at the University of South Wales for Digital and STEM. And then we have Ciara Mitchell from ScotlandIS, the cyber cluster covering Scotland. And so thank you for joining us today, Phil, Clare and Ciara. And what I thought I'd do, we've got lots to cover, lots of great work that's happening within the clusters and at the national level. And what I thought I'll do in the first question to get us going is around setting the scene of exactly what are cyber clusters, because they're different from region to region. So Phil, if I could start with you. What is a cyber cluster from your perspective in the northeast?
That's really interesting. Hello, Richard. And I was going to answer that by saying, well, I don't think there is anything that's exactly a cyber cluster. They're all very different. But basically, they're a way of coalescing an ecosystem around cybersecurity, academia, commercial providers, people who are interested in the subject, the professionals working in it. It depends on what you really want from the customer. It's a way of bringing these people together and representing them at a more sort of regional level.
Great, thank you, Phil. And Ciara, from your perspective in Scotland, what is a cluster to you?
Yeah, hi everybody. So I always see the cluster as being something, a vehicle for driving growth. You know, it's about bringing the community together so that collectively we can have that one voice, that the power that comes with harnessing the involvement of quite a wide community that we have up here in Scotland, and really making sure that local businesses can benefit from the economic opportunity that comes with a growing market like cybersecurity, and at the same time, of course, helping to keep local businesses safe and secure by constantly promoting the good work and the strengths we have in the cybersecurity sector here, and making sure that local businesses are availing of that as well.
Listen, thanks, Ciara. It's interesting to see, those similarities and some of those differences. And Clare, I know that Wales has a different structure in terms of their clusters. As in, there is obviously a regional focus in terms of Wales as a region, but actually they focus clusters, as I understand it, around different topics and different areas. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes, we've got a north and south cluster, which are the sort of regional approaches, but we've also got a number of subject-specific clusters. So we have an IP cluster, a CNI cluster, we have a capture the flag cluster, which enables us to sort of give training to people. We have education and training, and we have data privacy, and then the cluster that I manage, which is the Women in Cyber Wales cluster. And each of those really have a specific focus to support local needs. And of course, during the pandemic, it's it's been great because we've been able to take advantage of a much greater geographical reach, and more people have been able to attend all the different clusters.
Great, thanks, Claire. It's and we very much found the same in Cheltenham from the pandemic and our events, which had always been physical up until the pandemic struck, and then we went virtual, and that's enabled us to reach not just across the UK but even internationally as well. And I know quite a few of the clusters across the country are forming relationships and partnerships overseas, which is really, really exciting in terms of cyber growth for the UK. Before I sort of move the conversation on to around how clusters are driving the growth of the sector, I thought it'd just be a nice point to introduce and mention some of the work that we're all involved in, along with 6 or 7 other of the active clusters in the UK, to develop a common operating framework for clusters. And the reason we're doing this, we've been working with the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, who own the cyber security agenda for government. And it's around enabling us to operate in a consistent way whilst keeping that regional focus, but then also enabling government support and funding to come into the clusters to enable us to build on the great work that we've been doing. I will also, as well, at the end of the talk, talk about how you can get involved with your local cluster, because it's really important. We are built for and develop and run for our members, and we're always keen to attract new individuals, new businesses into our clusters. So we'll talk about that at the end of the panel discussion. So in terms of moving the conversation on, then I think obviously driving the growth of the cyber sector is a key aspect of the UK's national cyber strategy, and there's obviously a great opportunity there with it being a burgeoning industry. So I'm interested to explore with you the role that cyber clusters play in driving economic growth in the region, and perhaps if you could give an example of what your cluster is doing to remove blockers and support that growth. So I think that's a key aspect of what clusters are about. And maybe Ciara, if you could start us off with that one, please.
Yeah, sure, happy to. I mean, there's a lot of different ways clusters can help, but I'll just give a few examples, as you've said, and I'm sure Phil and Claire will add some more as well. And one of the simple things we do is just sharing knowledge, sharing insights. So we want to make sure that all the cybersecurity companies in Scotland, especially the startups and the SMEs, are aware of all the programs, the innovation grants, the accelerators, the open innovation calls, through DASA and others, that they're aware of these and availing of them and using them as an opportunity to develop their businesses. Sometimes smaller organisations don't have the resources just to keep on top of this. They're so busy trying to develop the products, find the first customers, that they're kind of missing out on some of these opportunities that can really help to accelerate their businesses. So just sharing that knowledge and making sure that we're collating that information and having an easy route to disseminating, to sharing that with the cluster is one example of how we can help. And certainly seen an increased intake in some of the companies up here going on the Cyber 101 Bootcamp and NCSC Accelerator and other programs just from sharing that knowledge. Another example is we had, as part of speaking to the companies in Scotland, we get to understand what their challenges are. And so we heard from a few of them that they were finding engagement with the public sector, and in particular was public sectors in Scotland. So we ran a number of round tables. We had representatives from Scottish Government and procurement at one of them. We ran kind of a dummy session that covered both the Scottish procurement frameworks as well as the UK-wide ones. And it's facilitating events like that. An individual company would find it very hard to get someone from Scottish Government procurement to come and talk to them. While we have the access to that, we're a neutral body. We have the connections, we have the relationships, and we can facilitate those kind of events, and also that knowledge sharing from bringing those companies together as well to discuss what successes they've had in public sector, for example, so that we're helping the cluster to help themselves, which is a key part of the role. It's not. It has to be about the collective force of the cluster and working together to help each other.
Great. No, thank you, Ciara. Some fascinating stuff, and yeah, very important point there about clusters and the organisations within the cluster. being sustainable, and we're there to facilitate and make those things happen, aren't we? Rather than to sort of mandate and sort of control them. So yeah, thank you very much for that, and I really get that sense that the importance of innovation, as we know, and we'll perhaps touch on that later in terms of how crucial that is to growth in the cyber sector, and what we can do as clusters to support that. And Phil, maybe if you could you tell us a bit about the work that you're doing in the northeast in terms of supporting growth and removing blockers to that in the region?
Yes, certainly, Richard. So I think we approach it from three aspects. The first is just to raise awareness, to get some belief into the region about its own cybersecurity strength and ability. So we make a lot of noise. We have a lot of events, similar to what Ciara's just said about some that support, some that pass on information, some just to raise awareness. And one of the key roles, I think, of a cluster is to create that impression that there is something much bigger than the individual organisations, both nationally and internationally. It's much easier for local and central government to deal with a collection of organisations than just individual organisations. So that's the first thing. The second is that we try and support existing businesses. And one of the key things that they've been talking to us about recently is the lack of skilled people coming into the market. There's a big disconnect between people studying cybersecurity and getting jobs. And so we've been doing some work with DCMS actually to understand what's dysfunctional within the market. I've got some great ideas going forward, and we'll put those into place. And the last thing, or the third thing, is supporting new businesses or supporting people coming into the business. So working on an innovation centre, and I think we might come back to that later on in the discussion, to encourage new businesses to start or at least create highly skilled professional people.
Excellent. Thanks, Phil. And building on that, Claire, Phil touched on skills, and I know that's a sort of a subject very, very close to your heart. It'd be good to understand what you're doing in Cyber Wales and the Women in Cyber cluster to sort of help address that and that need for greater diversity as a route to driving growth in the sector.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I mean, the clusters in Wales, all operating under Cyber Wales banner, operate very much the same as Phil and Ciara have just explained, really, providing guidance for businesses. But also, I think one of the key strengths is that networking and collaboration opportunity. So I think that's a really important feature of the clusters. In terms of diversity, we're still seeing that that's a huge issue. My focus is around gender diversity, but actually diversity from many different perspectives is a key issue. And if you look at the reports, there's between 12 and 20% of the workforce in cybersecurity are women, and yet we know there's a gap in the roles that need filling. So if we could encourage more women into the industry, then that's going to make a big difference to that statistic. And I think, the cluster that I manage provides a really good support opportunity for women who are already in the industry, but also women who are looking to get into the industry. And I get quite a lot of approaches from businesses who are trying to improve gender diversity in their own organisations, who will ask me to publicise jobs for them, and also will, ask for advice about how to improve diversity. And I think, speaking to people who are looking at job adverts and perhaps thinking, oh, this isn't for me, this company, that means I can then give feedback, or I can pass it to other women in the network and say, what could this company do to improve their diversity? And I think the clusters really are very much a go-to point of contact. So when people are in organisations are looking for all different things, like funding, like networking opportunities, like talking to students, the clusters provide that opportunity to network.
Excellent. No, thanks, Claire. It reminds me of our latest Cyber Cheltenham event. The other month, back in March, and we did a similar thing, a sort of a showcase piece with students, mostly, in fact, all female students, and talking about their experiences of either work experience or aspects of the sector they were interested in. And directly off the back of that event, they've had opportunities to either join apprenticeships with companies in our cluster, and it's fantastic to sort of see that in action and the impact it can start to have. Excellent. So just still on the theme around economic growth, I just want to explore a little bit with you, and I guess we've touched on it with the diversity piece, is around how, as clusters, we can ensure that growth in the cyber sector has a positive impact across the region and the communities that we're a part of. I don't know, Ciara, would you have some thoughts on that to share with us?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I must say that in Scotland, the Scottish Government Cyber Resilience Team, I would work very closely with them, and they have a very strong inclusive agenda when it comes to skills, and a lot of work has been done through an organisation called Skills Development Scotland. So the cluster would work closely with them and support them. So just to give a few examples, there's been a programme of work focusing on people with neurodiverse conditions and helping them to not only go to get trained and to get qualified, but to supporting them in the workplace as well, and to find those first roles in particular. Similarly, there was a programme for long-term unemployed, and we would find a significant proportion that would be women returning from a long absence, whether it's through kids or whatever, but is equally open to both male and female. And again, it's not just about the training; it's also about reaching into the cluster to help find companies who will give them interviews and then hopefully find them roles. Because training will only go so far. You've really got to help to find those companies who are supportive of these programs and help to find those interviews as well. And I know there's another program on retraining veterans as well. So there's and they've all seemed to be fairly successful. And I know the companies involved who are recruiting a lot of those individuals get lots out of it. Really are advocates for being part of that program and for making sure they are getting that diversity in their teams, whatever element of diversity that's ticking off. So yeah, it is important that we do keep to focus on getting the diversity. It is going to help with the skill shortage that we all know is there, and it means that we're finding new sources of skills and of talent through not only coming out of universities and colleges, but for people at any stage in their career really is the aim. So people can try and transition into cybersecurity no matter what the background, age or gender is really.
Great. No, thanks, Ciara. That's great and fascinating to hear the work that's being done and the impact it's starting to have. Phil, in terms of the Northeast, are there specific things that you're doing within your cluster to ensure that growth in the sector is having a positive impact, even from a skills perspective or in terms of supporting local businesses?
Yes, well, hopefully, Richard. It's so we're obviously involved in the national schemes such as Cyber First, which is a great way of getting young people into the industry, but also concentrating on things like apprenticeships, modern apprenticeships. The emerging TEAS skills would be a really exciting way of bringing people into the industry. But what we've found recently is that a couple of things. First of all, there are many more people working cybersecurity outside of cybersecurity than actually in the industry. So a lot of people are working in just general IT roles. It's a fraction of their job. So we need to think about those. And there's a disconnect between the highly skilled people that are coming out of college, who are highly cyber skilled, who are coming out of college, and the general business skills that people need when coming into industry. So we're trying to square that circle, if that's possible. But what we are doing, though, is focusing on those industries that the Northeast is very strong at: advanced manufacturing, public sector, offshore renewables, that kind of thing. So we're trying to support cybersecurity into those industries rather than just blanket coverage.
Richard, if I might just chip in there, actually, because I think one of the other things that I'm sure all the clusters do is we can provide a soft landing for inward investment. So, in Wales, we're always trying to encourage companies to come and set up in Wales. And we've got a cluster group that actually works out in the Middle East, and we've got links into Japan and France and so on. And companies that might be much further afield that are thinking of relocating or setting up sort of satellite offices can come to the clusters and say, where's a good place to set up? Who should I be speaking to? How do I get started in Wales? And I think that's something that you couldn't really get by having everybody working individually. The cluster brings all that knowledge together, if you like. And the other thing that I think is worth mentioning is about this sort of links with academia, because when I go along to lots of different cluster meetings, I pick up on information about what industry are looking for. And, universities and colleges can write the best programs that they can think of. But without actually linking directly with industry, you can never be sure that what you're delivering is actually fit for purpose, that it's actually equipping students to go out and get jobs at the end of their courses. And that's, again, something that the clusters can offer.
Oh, great. No, thank you. That's a really important part, isn't it? Is knowing that the investment the students and people are making in upskilling is going to be immediately effective, and forming that partnership between industry and academia in that sense. And on the subject of partnerships, then, just to move on to a slightly different subject, we've touched on innovation and that being a key ingredient to growth in the sector, and obviously with the cybersecurity sector, as you all know, very fast paced, and it's vital that we can stay ahead and continue to innovate. So from your perspective, I'm keen to understand how important those partnerships are between government, academia, both from a research and education perspective, and then obviously industry, but also the wider communities within our region. And maybe, Claire, you started to touch on elements of that. Perhaps if I could go to you first with that one.
Yeah, sure. One of the things that we've done that's been really successful, which I think is key coming out of the clusters, is that we will provide. Well, the cluster members will provide lunch and learn sessions for students. So they'll actually come into the university, or they'll go into the colleges, and they'll deliver a lunchtime session on something that's relating to their business, which really is bringing that industry into the education space. And not only are the students learning a great deal from that, it's building bridges between industry and the upcoming talent. And it's also an excellent way just to build relationships, so that students are already speaking to industry and learning the language and the culture, if you like, of an organisation, so that it's almost like having an apprenticeship, really, in an education space, because they're all getting to know each other as they're learning. And I think, that connection is priceless, really, in terms of what the clusters can offer.
No, absolutely. It transforms the education and skills they get, don't they, so that they can instantly have an impact when they go into employment. And Ciara, from your work in Scotland, thinking, I guess, now about the research work that's perhaps being done in some of the universities in Scotland, how's the sort of supporting that sort of join up between those research-focused academic institutions and industry, for example?
Yeah, no, it is really important, especially for any potential spinners coming out of university, because you really do need to make sure that you understand what challenge, what gap you're addressing, and you'll only learn that properly from speaking with the industry. But you also need to check on the market fit. You might be addressing a gap, but if you're doing it in such an expensive or complex way that's going to disrupt a business, then you might not get the traction you're expecting. So you really need to have those direct industry conversations, insights, ideally partnerships, doing a lot of work in collaboration with potential customers or partners. And for example, if a particular startup or spin-off was going to focus on the public sector, and whether it's UK government, NCSE, or some other organisation within public sector, they really need to have those conversations as early as possible. In terms of driving innovation, there's no point locking yourself in a room for 2 years and expecting to have the perfect product at the end. It's got to be true sitting down and meeting your product with their actual needs and making sure it's fit for their business, that it is going to make their lives our lives easier. So we do try and focus on the whole innovation side in the cluster, because, as you say, it is a route to growth. Absolutely, there's many ways. Inward investment, totally agree with Clare on how we can support that, but the innovation is a key one too. So we run cyber innovation clinics. And again, it's something a cluster could do where an individual company couldn't do. So what we do is we run. It's basically a friendly pitch. We'll have a panel of experts. I always make sure I bring in 1 or 2 individuals from outside of Scotland. So I had a speaker from DIT, from Yorke, not a speaker, sorry, a panelist. So we'll basically a friendly pitch where these startups can do that first pitch in front of a group of really insightful experts who've been there, who've probably run their own companies before they go and do that pitch in front of that first customer or that first investor. So it's simple ways like that where all we're asking for is a little bit of people's time, but it really does help those companies to be able to kind of get that, often first not great pitch out of the way, and then they can start to fine tune it. We are also working on a proposition for a Scottish Cyber Innovation Hub, because we have seen that as one of the gaps in Scotland. I mean, there's lots happening around the UK, but we would like to make sure we have something in Scotland. But that in no way would be set up in competition with the other innovation hubs around. Is very much going to be a partnership approach. So we've already been speaking to Yorke and speaking to Phil, who I'm sure will talk about his proposition as well, to make sure we're just basically extending that reach, but still working very much jointly together to make sure we're growing innovation UK wide.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ciara. And a lovely segue there into my question for you, Phil, around the innovation centre you mentioned earlier in the discussion. Maybe you could tell us a bit about the plans in the northeast there.
Yeah, absolutely. But can I just, before I do that, just say I think this is a perfect example of where clusters can make a big difference. They create the environment where innovation can land. They create the feeling that there is somewhere for these people to go, and that's a key part of what we're doing. So of the 5 universities in the northeast, 4 are strong in cybersecurity. In fact, we've got 2 centres of academic excellence in Newcastle and Northumbria. So Northumbria are working on with one of the business resilience centres, the Northeast Business Resilience Centre, which is a joint initiative with the police, and that allows students to kind of get a flavour for what it's like to work in companies without doing too much damage, and then get an opportunity to just springboard from there. And with Newcastle, we're working on this innovation centre to create a place where people with ideas, good ideas coming out of university, we can help them to monetize them, to help them to understand what they need to do to turn those ideas into business ideas. So they'll either produce new innovative companies in either hardware or software, or it'll produce highly skilled individuals that will then go on to feed the rest of the market.
Excellent. No, thanks, Phil. And it's very much the same story across other parts of the UK. From speaking to the other cluster leaders, there's regionally focused accelerators, and as you'd expect in our region, in Cheltenham, particularly with proximity to the NCSC, there's their own accelerator program, which is regionally based. But one of the key ingredients, and it's kind of reinforcing what's already been mentioned, is that partnership and forming those links with other parts of the UK that perhaps have similar specialities or complementary specialities to really strengthen the innovation offering. Excellent. And we talked a lot already about the importance of skills, and it obviously is the skills gap is a big issue, and the need for greater diversity in the sector is critically important. So I just give you the opportunity, I suppose, to build on some of the responses you've already given in terms of the work the clusters are doing to address this, and just to sort of add to that, no panel discussion would be complete without mentioning the pandemic, and obviously a lot of sectors, not necessarily cybersecurity, but a lot of other sectors have been badly impacted by the pandemic. Unemployment is increasing as a result. We heard on the news today sort of further increase in unemployment, particularly in young people under the age of 30. And it'd be good to understand from your perspective, is there an opportunity to actually retrain people from other industries and help them sort of transition into the cyber sector? And if so, what role can clusters play in helping make that happen?
Yeah, thanks, Richard. I mean, I think clusters are in a really good place to support development of skills. We've got the sort of meetings that go on regularly where people can, almost embed themselves in the cyber industry and get a real feel for what's on offer there and where their particular skill set might fit in. But in addition, in Wales, we've got an education and training subcluster, which has a focus purely on the education and training side. So it's linking sort of college programmes and university programmes with the wider sector, and looking at opportunities all the time, for developing skills. And then we've also got the Capture the Flag cluster, which is a really nice way of allowing people to just sort of have a go at doing some cyber, really. And, the Capture the Flag cluster that we've got is actually been partly built in collaboration with students, which is a fantastic way to showcase skills, really. So that sort of knowledge of where the gaps are, of where the opportunities are, is something that the clusters can really help with.
Great, thanks, Claire. And Phil, same question to you. Are you seeing industries impacted by COVID in your region, and is there an opportunity there to perhaps support retraining and to bring them into the cyber sector?
Yeah, I think we've seen industry turn on its head completely, and some businesses are flat out, can't get enough people to recruit, and others are still in furlough. So it's not a consistent picture. But I think businesses are being forced to rethink about their work. A lot of working from home has arrived, which completely out of the blue, something that we thought would never happen, happened instantly overnight. So that's thrown up a lot of issues. But what we're finding is that there's I keep going back to this word disconnect between those people who are looking for an industry placement in the cybersecurity industry and those people who are looking to recruit. So one of the things we've been doing is we're recording every week a short video with people who are working in the industry, so people get an understanding of what it's like to work there, and how they make the transition and how they actually came to where they are, because there's never one easy way. You don't just go to college and then get that job. You tend to go through a whole series of things to take you there. So they're very useful. And I think things like the Cyber First programs we've talked about, also working with the technical groups like Osaka, Northeast Ladies Hacking Society, those kind of people who represent the industry, bringing it all together. And that's exactly what the cluster is doing.
Brilliant. Thanks, Phil. And how's the picture looking in terms of that in Scotland, Ciara?
Yeah, well, very like what Phil's saying, it has been a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, I think overall the cybersecurity sector has been doing well. They've never probably been more in demand in some cases. Now it has hit some companies more than others, especially some of the startups. But in terms of the skills gap, I mean, we talk about the skills gap a lot. What I still feel we don't have enough insights is what particular roles we're talking about and what particular levels, because we are seeing, more and more people you see on LinkedIn with this open to work. They're even within cybersecurity, there have been cutbacks, there have been some people let go. Obviously, each year we're going to see a certain amount of graduates from colleges, from universities, even from schools. In Scotland, you can now study cybersecurity in secondary school. But it's still unclear where the gap is. And sometimes I think it's industry looking for people with really focused specialist skills, coming along with half a dozen certifications, looking for 5-10 years experience, rather than just looking at the potential, the fact they've gone and got themselves, an education, or even if it's a retraining program, they've taken on some re-education or education to college universities to get into cybersecurity. They then need to look at the potential and they need to train them and bring them into the organization. I just sometimes, I think the people are there, I think the jobs are there, and it's just that matchmaking that needs to happen, and a little bit more flexibility from some industries would really help to go a long way, rather than being too worried about have they got this cert, have they got that cert. Give them the right type of interview and just see what their potential is, and then take them on. So I know there's a skills gap. I still think there's a lot more insights to be needed to especially with the impact of COVID, to see what exactly the friction is and why we're still worried about the skills gap. And I know it's going to, there's going to be increasing demand, so we really have to keep looking towards the pipeline. But we also need to make sure that anyone coming out of college, university now are getting those first roles and getting the experience they need as well.
Can I just put in there?
Yeah, of course.
We're finding in many ways the other way around. People are coming out with highly skilled, but what the businesses are looking for is general business understanding and some of those softer skills, and those need a bit of work on. So sorry.
No, it's a really good point. No, so Clare.
Yeah, I wondered if I could add in here as well about the Cyber First programme, because I do think this is an excellent way to sort of get young people interested in cyber. And Phil touched upon it earlier. The Cyber First Schools certification scheme is a really good way of getting schools to look at what they offer in terms of computer science and cyber, and then to build on that and to broaden it out, so it's incorporating lots of different elements, and one of those elements is linking with industry. So having the clusters there as a sounding board or as a go-to place, I think in that programme is really beneficial. And same for the universities who apply for Cyber First ACEs. That means that they can showcase their sort of how they're building their web of contacts, if you like, and extending their reach through the cyber clusters. It's an easy way to make contact with lots of people who are interested in that sector.
Thanks, Clare. It's a really important point. So it's one of the things in the Cheltenham and Gloucestershire region that our cluster represents has been a pilot, as you'll know, for the Cyber Schools Hub programme, which was a key ingredient of that was about getting industry engaged with schools and having people from all the different myriad roles in the cyber industry going into schools and raising awareness, providing a kind of insight into the types of careers that can be had in the industry, and also getting them hands-on with some of the technology in some cases, and really sort of hoping to inspire those students. And the cluster, because we're clusters, we're uniquely positioned in that we've got an understanding of the schools in the area, but also those relationships with industry, and are in a position to be able to make that join up. And that's been really successful. I know that the plan is and it's already starting to roll that out into other regions in the UK. So that's really an exciting part of the skills growth piece.
So, Richard, I was just going to add, I mean, it's programs like that are key, because if you don't catch kids at school level, they often already then will make that decision to go into a course that doesn't naturally lead them into cybersecurity. Doesn't mean they can't come back to it later, but we're still not seeing enough take up in numbers, taking STEM subjects, taking courses at universities, and certainly not from a diversity perspective, whether it's people from slightly poor backgrounds or females. I think it's still, I think in cybersecurity in the UK, it's still 20% females are 20% of the workforce. We're never going to change that unless we kind of hit kids at the school, not hit kids, sorry, access kids at a school age, to try and get them encouraged into that industry, before they make the choice of what they're going to do post school.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I think the industry itself has to look at some of the language that we use to encourage those people who are turned off by some of the things that we say, to encourage them to come in. Use of perhaps things like blue and red teams, where red's exciting, blue's dull, and very much we need more blue people to come in, as it were. And so language like that, I think we need to be careful about.
Yeah, exactly, and that sort of image of the hoodie and the sort of binary flowing down the screen as well is probably putting off a lot of people, particularly women, from coming into the industry, because it portrays a particular kind of picture. And so yes, hopefully we can start to move away from those sort of stereotype images. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. I think we've got a real sort of sense from the discussion and of the great work that clusters are doing and the impact that they're having. And we mentioned at the start that clusters are quite different from region to region, and they're also sort of funded and supported differently. And I think it's fair to say the vast majority of clusters, until very recently, or actually up until now, have been funded mostly either run on a voluntary basis or funded from sponsorship from industry, and then a bit of help in some cases from government. But what we're doing, we're actually on a piece of work now. We're going with the cluster leads and with DCMS to try and support clusters further. So to build on this great work that we've been been talking about, and to have this impact further. Very exciting time for us as cluster leaders, and to help deliver that and deliver that support down to clusters. We're forming a new organisation called the UK Cyber Cluster Collaboration, or the UKC3 for short. And that organisation, by the time this goes live and people watching it, that organisation will be live. So do look out for us, ukc3.org, and that organisation will be working, supporting clusters, so routing funding and support into the regional areas to build on that impact, but then also having that single voice of representing clusters and those regional needs at a national level and inputting into the national cyber strategy. So that's a very exciting time. I also promised you as well at the end of the discussion to let people know how they could engage with their local clusters. So I think the best way to find out where your local cluster is, and pretty much all regions of the UK are covered with a few exceptions, is to go to the Cyber Exchange website. So if you search for Cyber Exchange, or the URL is cyberexchange.uk.net, and there's a whole section on the Cyber Exchange website around clusters. And so for Cyber Wales, it'll tell you the different clusters that Clare mentioned, and for all the other regions of the UK as well are on there. So do get in touch, as we've alluded to in the conversations. Without our members, our clusters don't exist. So the more people we can get involved, and also people from outside of the cyber industry. I think a key aspect of what we're doing to drive that growth is to bring industries into our clusters that perhaps rely on cybersecurity products, services, and advice, and want to be part of that discussion. And the more rich and diverse we can make the ecosystem, the more effective we will be. So I think that just remains for me to say a massive thank you to Phil, Clare, and Ciara, and for Chris, the introduction. And we look forward to speaking with you as you look to engage with clusters going forward. Thank you very much, everyone.